welcome Monica from Gothfarm. Thank you so much for sitting down to chat with us at String Theory. A little bit about your special yarn. I'm going to read a little introduction, but then I'm going to have you introduce yourself and tell us your story. So Monica Korsha is the maker behind Gothfarm Yarn. Gothfarm Yarn began as a flash of inspiration. What if there was a farm for raising literal black sheep of the world? A place that prized wool so colorful the fiber had no need for dyes. The idea grew into a full-fledged yarn business that is unique for its celebration of undyed natural color fiber spun from heritage reed sheep and other fiber fauna. Gothfarm is based in Austin, Texas. Yes. But Monica will be sharing her gorgeous skeins with us at String Theory Yarn Company in a trunk show running April 6th through 20th. So I'm so happy that you get to sit down and I can grill you for a little while about your amazing yarn. And I was hoping you would start by telling us your personal story and how Gothfarm came to be.
Yeah, well, thank you for that introduction, Emily. And yeah, I think Gothfarm really started as sort of falling down the fiber rabbit hole. You know, when I learned to knit probably about 15 years ago now, just sort of an informal class, just thought it would be fun. And I had an amazing knitting teacher who encouraged us all to go to like fiber festivals. And here in Texas, there's often animals at the fiber festivals and people who raise them. And I went there and loved seeing all of the indie dyed yarn and some of the natural colors too. But I noticed that there wasn't so much a variety of different fibers there. People would be, having, either the commercial skeins that they would dye themselves, or they would have a couple of the natural colors from their own animals, which kind of tended to just have a couple of a similar breed. So it was really inspired by, sort of the yarn that was there, but also noted sort of what wasn't there as well. So, long story short, I became a spinner and started spinning my own yarn, making different fiber blends. Really enjoyed doing that and really enjoyed kind of blending different colors together, different textures together from different sorts of fiber fauna, from Angora goats to alpacas to different sheep breeds. But then I wanted to try and scale that up and make more yarn than I could just make on my wheel or my spindle. And there was a local mill nearby, Independence Fiber Mill. And so I floated the idea of having them make some yarn for me. I live in an apartment in Austin, do not raise my own animals, but there's lots of fiber producers around. So talked with them about buying some fiber in bulk, sent it off to the mill. And had a really positive experience getting this custom yarn made. And so then I decided in 2017 to try and make it a small yarn business. And I've been doing it since then, working with different mills in different states and different fiber producers, still mostly in Texas, but in other states as well. And so I'm sort of the fiber HQ, where I kind of bring in the different fiber from different places, see what works well together, and then send it off to the mill, and then they make the actual skeins that that I have on my website, and then I'll be sending to you guys.
That is so cool. And I know you also sent to us some pictures in advance. I asked for glamorous headshots of sheep, which we got, and they're amazing, and I cannot wait to share them. Like, we all crowded around the computer to look at these adorable sheep. But also you sent us some process photos of shearing. And so this is not in my list of questions that I sent you in advance, but it's popping to my head. So to what extent are you involved then in like that shearing? I know you work with mills and that so you can scale up, but do you find that now that you have a business that shearing is like a professional job, right? So to what extent have you gotten to participate in that?
I went to sheep shearing school, I think in 2018 or 2019.
Wow.
It was an amazing experience, but it was also a learning experience that I should probably leave this to the professionals.
Wow.
So I often try and show up on shearing day when I can, when the professionals are there. and I will assist them. Like I'll help get the fleece off
Mhm.
of the sheep, keep things moving, keep things clean. And then that skirting is when you clean the fiber,
Got it.
off
Mhm.
fleece, pull out any of the icky bits, just kind of in a preliminary way, and then skirt, and then keep the fleeces moving so the shearer can kind of focus on the sheep. So I've sheared in shearing school. I've helped out a couple of friends, who have their
Mhm.
animals on a stand sometimes in a pinch, but it is definitely best left to the professionals. And a cool fact actually about shearing school was I was there when Kate, if anybody's on TikTok or Instagram, Katie McRose from Right Choice Shearing was there. Pretty big sheep shearers on social media. And so before she was famous, I got to meet her in the shearing school in San Angelo, Texas.
The sheep shearing TikTok celebrities, of
Yeah.
course. Of course. Yes. Amazing. So this kind of actually brings me thinking about the intimacy of being there present to, meet the sheep that you're making yarn from. It's something that I think most indie dyers that we work with have not been able to do. What an honor. And kind of seeing each step of the process
Mhm.
from not just from finished yarn to a dyed skein, but also the entire way. What makes undyed yarn and the type of yarn that you make different from like a typical skein of like superwash sock yarn that we might sell in our store?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a couple of major differences, I would say. Obviously, the color is often a different one. So I mean, it comes in different natural shades often. So I have some, different examples of it here. So no dyes, but you still can get like a really, rich black
Beautiful.
color. And then sort of our rich, this is our carbonado, and then our rich, brown color here in Ultisol. But yeah, so the colors obviously, usually a little bit more of a natural shade. And then they often have very different textures. So I think a lot of commercial yarns kind of focus on superwash, merino, stuff that's very like smooth and soft. And, I'm a big fan of alpaca, and our yarns with alpaca are pretty soft, but they all kind of have a little bit of like a rustic feel to them. So it kind of grabs you back. That's kind of how I describe it as, and I find it a pleasure to knit with, because it's just kind of, it's not so slipping through your hands. It's kind of really has this texture that grips back onto you. So kind of the rustic nature of it. And then another big difference is just sort of the variety of fiber fauna present. This yarn right here, Carbonado, is a blend of 3 different fiber fauna. So it is alpaca, Gotland sheep, and a Coopworth sheep blend. And even our yarns that are 100% of a certain sheep breed, they're often a little bit of unusual or rare sheep breeds. So this is our yarn Roan from that's the name of the yarn, but it's 100% Navajo churro yarn. And these sheep are hairy. The fleeces, when they're off of the sheep, almost look like bearskin rugs or something. They're just
Mhm.
these heavy pieces of wool, and they're a dual coated breed with a soft downy undercoat and a long hairy overcoat. And this yarn blends both together. So it makes a really like rustic yarn with sort of this hairy halo and a lot of kind of subtle colors in it as the overcoat and undercoat blend together. So it's different breeds, rustic texture, natural colors. They kind of stand out, and then also the fact that they are milled at small mills. Each mill kind of has its own machinery, reacts differently to the yarn. So often there's even though the yarns are mill spun, sometimes people think they're hand spun just because of the milling equipment is a little bit different than you would see in a large commercial mill. And so it sometimes the fiber there's a little bit more of kind of a variety in it itself. So yeah, sometimes it has a little rustic look to it as well as a rustic feel.
And that's why I'm so glad we're having this as a trunk show, so that
Yeah.
we will have the skeins available online as well. But for the local community, they'll be able to like put their hands on and choose like really the very perfect skein for them. So we're really looking forward to that. And while we're on this topic, my little short story, when I was a newish knitter in my first like year or two of knitting, and I didn't learn how to knit till I was like 25 years old. Um, and I remember I visited a farm just like because I was on vacation with my then boyfriend and my husband now, but we visited like an alpaca farm and I picked up a
Oh,
skein of
cool.
yarn. It was a big purchase for me because it was, you know, from their alpacas, and I made a hat out of it. And I was very, very surprised when I blocked this hat and it grew to be like the size of a giant like basket, and I basically could never use it. Can you talk about what kinds of projects for your yarn? What would be like the type of thing? Because we're probably not. Would you make socks with it? Would you stick to things like color? Like what would you recommend for your
Yeah,
yours?
that's a really good question. And it is really important, yeah, to go to each yarn and sort of treat it as an individual, because they all are sort of a little bit different. But in general, I would say like for our especially like rustic yarns, like our Navajo churro here,
Mhm.
is it works really well for outerwear, like sort of the Icelandic sweaters, kind of the Lopi style sweaters. This
Mhm.
is spun in a similar way as that yarn. So it's a single ply and rustic. So you definitely, don't want it, right next to your skin. You want to kind of have a long sleeve shirt underneath it. But once you do that, it's an amazing texture to just sort of just surround yourself in. And that's for knitters would be like a sweater, but Navajo churro actually is historically used for weaving by the Navajo people of the southwestern United States. And so the sheep is around because of them. They've really cultivated the different colors and really developed a very interesting like weaving and fiber art culture around those the sheep and the wool. So kind of with that in mind, I wanted to show, this is a sweater I've
Great,
actually made.
awesome.
It's made from the Cherio, and this color work here was designed by Kevin Aspas, and he's a Navajo weaver who, usually works with blankets and rugs, but I asked him to collaborate on the sweater so we could kind of bring those motifs into sort of a different fiber medium, but still kind of let the churro shine and sort of its traditional color work and patterns. And so that's an example of something to do with kind of this rustic yarn, and really takes advantage of the kind of its texture and its colors. Another thing I actually like to do is, you tell your hat story, Emily, is, make felted projects with this yarn,
Yeah,
because it's not super wash. Most of this stuff will felt up. So here's a hat I made that actually turned out a little too big. So then I threw it in the washing machine and it felted
true.
up into this nice little
Now
biking
it's
beanie.
perfect.
So yeah,
Amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So
a really great idea.
yeah, felting with it. And then, like natural colors look great together, but I also really love how they can provide like sort of a canvas that can make indie dyed yarns really pop.
Mhm.
So this is a hat actually I recently finished with our yarn tallow here, which is kind of a chunky white yarn made out of California red sheep wool. But I'm held sort of a lace weight fuzzy indie dyed yarn with it. The name escapes me right now. I got it from the yarn. There's a yarn truck that came by about 2 weeks ago, and they had some amazing indie dyed yarn in it. But yeah, just sort of wanted it to be this nice, like textured blank canvas that could help this, bright fuzzy yarn kind of shine. And so it was a fun way to kind of combine the two together.
That's great because our it feels like our store is just full of really bright, colorful yarn, and a lot of times our customers will pick up like a perfectly beautiful speckly neon skein, um, and be looking for a neutral to go with it. And I tell you, like, we have a really, really, really hard time, as you have noticed, keeping like white yarn in stock or black yarn in stock. It's actually pretty challenging to do on a consistent basis. And there's nothing more frustrating than not being able to like find something that seems so basic.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like an availability issue. So yeah, I think we'll have to also collaborate on a couple of uh, pattern ideas for matching some of the existing indie dyers that we carry in our shop. I think that would be great.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to move along because I have a lot of really great questions. And I would love to learn a little bit more about your favorite sheep breeds and what makes them special and why you chose that to work with them.
Yeah, I would say probably like the Navajo Churro, which I know I've been talking a lot about, but it's one of my favorites just because the variety of colors it comes in naturally. The sheep themselves have such a beautiful just figure. They're amazing to watch. The farm I get them from is in Fredericksburg, Texas, and I usually go out there and help on shearing day. And it's a flock of maybe about 40 animals, and they're just so beautiful to see kind of coming together and with the long, with the long fleeces. And they also have often some pretty impeccable horns. So they can have some really, really large horns, and they can either grow up sort of vertically or kind of in these typical kind of ram curls. So just beautiful animals with beautiful, colorful fleeces with a really dynamic, I think, fiber history and culture. So really have gotten to know a lot more about sort of Navajo weaving and Navajo culture just through being around these sheep and talking with people who know them. So there's actually a fiber co-op in New Mexico called the Rainbow Fiber Co-op that's dedicated specifically to Navajo Churro sheep, and so they've been helping to spread the word about it. So it's been I just really love them because there's a deep history to it, and I think people are starting to recognize the value of the fiber outside of just sort of the Southwest community that where they traditionally have been raised. So it's been really cool to see that and see that history kind of evolve into modern times and see different people working with it. So that's one of my favorites, just because the wool and the animal are both amazing. Another one is the Jacob sheep. Oh, actually, I should show you, since we're talking about the animals. I have a little sheep zine that I will be sending you guys. So
Oh, great.
here's a little like rendition of the
Oh,
churro.
that is so cute. I am so delighted right now to
Yeah, because I go
be
and
seeing
talk
this.
about animals and people are just like trying to envision it. And I'm like, oh, let me
Right.
show you a
No, this
picture.
is great. I love the mini scene. Awesome.
And
Okay,
then
go on.
probably a top or kind of another favorite is the Jacob sheep. So
Mhm.
the sheep was sort of the inspiration for the Gothfarm logo. So just they're another sort of heritage breed with a long history of people kind of using the fiber. And they're a black and white piebald sort of sheep. So they're very unusual looking. And you would think from this picture, it kind of looks a little scary, but in real life, these animals are almost like medium-sized dogs. They're not that big. And so there's these spindly little, they're sheep often on these spindly little legs with these black and white fleeces and these amazing horns. So they're actually, I've heard some historians say that they were used as sort of like lawn ornaments in Elizabethan times, just because they were so interesting to look at. People just liked having them on their estates. But it's not all looks either, because their wool is really can be used for lots of different things. It's kind of a medium feel. So it's good to add to things like alpaca or mohair to give it some body, give it some texture. And whenever you take the black and white fleeces and blend them together, you usually get a really nice heather gray from it that usually just adds some depth and intrigue to anything you add it to. So I really like them because they're interesting, weird sheep with, fiber that's really useful and just kind of enhances anything you add it to.
Right. And you said when I asked you online for our blog post companion to this interview that if there were any sheep to represent your personality, I think you chose the Jacob sheep. And it
Yes,
sounds,
yeah.
based on what I have experienced so far, it seems spot on. um, so moving along, I would love to hear a little bit more about the challenges you encounter in your business because um, I feel like there would be more people doing what you did if it were easy, right? So can you talk to us about some unique challenges that you encounter making the type of yarn that you do? And then how do you problem solve those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just sort of finding all the materials and getting everything together and not having it you know, cost an arm and a leg. So part of that is just finding what I need and who has it and where I can get it from. So luckily, I think part of that is just kind of showing up at fiber fests, and once people know you're like the wool lady and wants to, you know, buy your fiber and things, people come to you. So, but when I was first starting out, I was just like, okay, how do I actually find stuff that's good and making sure it's good quality and the stuff I need. So part of it's just finding the supply and making sure it's good and quality stuff. The other part is actually just milling the yarn. There are not very many mills around. The ones that are around often, you know, they'll open up and 5 years later they're gone. And then the mills that do stick around, they're in such high demand that you know, it's normal for it to be a year or even a year and a half to get your yarn back from the mill after you send the fiber.
Oh,
So
wow.
part of it is just, you know, just when stuff's gone, it's gone until, you know, a year later potentially. So yeah, just that time span can be really difficult, and just finding mills too that you like to work with. So, you know, I have about 3 mills that I work pretty closely with and really enjoy working with them. And we have open communication, and sometimes, you know, I have a vision for the yarn, and that's not what the fiber wants to be. So I have to kind of work with them and figure out, you know, what's going to make my yarn look good, what's going to work on their machines. And sometimes it can be quite a process. And then once you figure it out, you have to wait a year to get it back.
Yeah. Can I
So
jump in just to
yeah,
a similar kind of piggyback question? When you're deciding what blends you need to, you know, a little bit of this sheep, a little bit of that. Some of them are like 100% Navajo churro, but some of them are blends, like your our carbonado. You said was like
yeah.
3 different sheep breeds. So do you like hand spin, like, does an idea come into your head, or do you go based on kind of traditional practices, or maybe it's a combo? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I usually start off, yeah, as hand spinning things, kind of getting the different fibers and creating blends on my, you know, my drum carder and on my wheel. But the thing is, you know, when you're a hand spinner, you can kind of make those little micro adjustments when things aren't working. On a machine, kind of you set it and you go. So the biggest thing that I have to keep in mind when deciding blends is the staple length. So a lot of machine, like how long an actual fiber is, because if it's usually under 3 inches or so, it's not going to spin correctly. And so I might be able to accommodate it myself, but it's not going to work on the machines. Another issue is if a staple's too long, and sometimes, unless you're working with a machine that or a mill that's specifically primed to take on those fibers, it can get I've heard mills refer to like tornadoing, and it can, you know, kind of cause these big lumps and bumps in the yarn. And then also, even if the staple is long enough for the machines, if there's significant difference between the staples and the fibers, some can puff out at other times and kind of make an inconsistent yarn. And sometimes that effect can be interesting, but if it's not what you were planning or wanting, sometimes it's a little bit, it can be disappointing. And, you know, and I've had experiences like that. And then, you know, I talk with the mill and we try and brainstorm about what could be done better next time, to make more of the yarn that I was envisioning. But at the same time, you know, once you send that fiber, you kind of cross your fingers and you have a vision in your head. But you know what it's going to be on the machine is what it's going to be. And so sometimes it comes back and it's a little bit different, and sometimes it's a pleasant surprise too. So it can be interesting, you know, because sometimes the way you process it and the way you introduce your air into it on your kind of by hand will be pretty different on the machine. So even the luster can look different, or the halo can look different. So it's not even just the consistency of the yarn. It can be the actual, you know, how the light hits it or things like that too. So it's always interesting to see the differences. But yeah, staple length is the main thing to keep in mind, and just sending good, you know, good strong fiber, because, you know, I might be able to be very delicate in my approach, but if something is a little too fine or a little too soft, or has some broken tips to it, the machinery at a mill will just tear it apart, and then you get a lot of neps in your yarn, or a weak kind of brittle yarn.
Oh, that really, that you speaking about this is giving me a whole new appreciation for yeah, smaller scale yarn makers, because it seems to me like such a, you know, leap of faith to send your fiber and just hope that, I mean, do you get like samples made first, and do you get to say like whether it's going to work, you can go do the whole thing, or is it kind of like a just
Good,
trusting
yeah.
your
Yeah, the mills that I think I kind of built a good relationship with, they keep me updated. Where like, okay, I spun a little bit today. This is what it looks like. I feel good about this, or I think we should maybe consider doing that. Like they'll keep me updated or send pictures, and we can kind of go there. So it's not a complete mystery usually,
Mhm.
but sometimes we have had to change course. Like I had a yarn once that was it's a blend of was a blend of mohair and Shetland sheep wool. So mohair from a goat is really, kind of long and curly and shiny, and then the Shetland sheep fiber was very it was finer and a little bit shorter than the mohair, and it just wasn't spinning correctly. But we made some nice roving out of it, and it's
Mhm.
perfectly fine for hand spinners to spin. So, but rather than try and forge ahead and make a yarn that would kind of look a little crummy, we just decided to keep it at the roving stage. And so there's always things you can do, I think, to try, and that's what I mean kind of by listening to the fiber and what it wants to be. There's things you can do to sort of kind of work with what you have. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's sort of once the fibers, the length it is, it's the blend you sent to them, and you kind of have to work with what the machines can do with it.
Sure. And at this point, Gothfarm has been around for about 7 years. Is that about
Yeah.
right? It's about seven
Yes.
years. So it sounds like you've had some real experience. I mean, I think some dyers aren't able to survive for 7 years, right? You've been able to kind of fine tune your relationships and the different, types of yarn that you make. So we're really excited to, we're really excited for it. As I was perusing your website, because I only came to know you because we were asking dyers about trunk shows. We were recruiting folks. We wanted to introduce our customer base to new yarns that they had never heard of, and you responded to our call, and when I went to your website, you were the very first person that I contacted. I,
Oh,
I don't know that I told you that,
awesome.
but we received a lot of feedback from that call. And of all of the dyers, I mean, because you're not really a dyer, I think uh, your company was the one I wanted to work with most. But anyway, I was, poking around your website, and I noticed that you partner with the Livestock Conservancy.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about this organization and the Shave 'em to Save 'em program, and why is this a cool thing and a thing to support?
Yeah, of course. So the Livestock Conservancy is a nonprofit that's dedicated to preserving sort of rare, endangered heritage breeds, and like livestock in general. So cows, ducks, goats, horses, and sheep. And so the Shave 'em to Save 'em program is an initiative. I think they probably launched about 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And it's all about trying to get sort of fiber enthusiasts working with breeds that are on sort of their priority conservation list. So these are sheep breeds that are endangered or rare, or they're trying to encourage people to raise them and sort of keep these sheep around, because if there's no demand for them, then people may not raise them and they may actually go extinct. So there are 24 unique sheep breeds on this list, and the whole idea of Shave 'em to Save 'em uh, is getting people to work with different fiber from these sheep. So you can work at any stage of the fiber. You can you can work with a raw fleece, or you can work with roving, or you can work with already made yarn. The only thing is you need to use at least 4 ounces of it and transform it in some way. So if you're working with roving, it could be spinning it into yarn. If you're working with yarn, it could be knitting a hat out of it. The whole idea is to get people working with these different breeds. And so to sign up to be part of the program and to start working with them, you go on their website and you order a passport. I think it's $15 to join. And then once you have your passport, you can reach out to people who are participating suppliers in the program, and buy fiber from them and let them know this is for my Shave 'em to Save 'em project. And they will send you a little sticker to put on your passport. And the whole idea with that then is to get people to fill up their passport, and to encourage them to keep doing that. They need to, you can take pictures of your passport along the way, send it to the Livestock Conservancy, and then they will give you rewards. So I think fiber wash or gift cards and things, all to get you working with this kind of the fibers on their list. And so I'm a supplier of the Jacob sheep roving and Navajo Churro yarn and roving.
Mhm. That is really cool. And, as a staff at String Theory, we've been talking a lot about our core values as a company. And String Theory is about to turn 20 years old this
Oh,
May.
amazing.
Yeah. And so looking back, it's like a really, I feel very honored to work here now because we're looking at the values that make this yarn shop what it is. And like environmental conservation is definitely like has been a part of that since the very beginning, like just one of many values that we have. But more and more, I feel like um, people are really waking up to the way our choices are all interconnected. And
Yeah.
the string theory is called string theory, the science name, and which I think you will appreciate
Yeah.
because Janet, our owner, is very grounded in the belief that like your choices can make an impact all over the world. So something that you buy can have a really big impact, something that you make. And there is a growing awareness among our customer base that um, like what we put on our bodies affects our health. It affects, the livelihoods of other people who
Hmm.
are involved in making your clothes. And even working with like a sheep breed that is, maybe not the softest, right? Maybe it doesn't have the right staple length and it's just fiddly on the machine. And so people don't want to work with it. But like we as a community choose to care, and it's changing the way we dress ourselves, right? I know that like 10 years ago when I was learning how to knit, um, I wouldn't have thought twice about putting 100% wool directly on my skin, or having to wear a layer underneath something in order to like quality wasn't really on my mind. So thank you so much for prioritizing these kinds of values. I had never heard of the Livestock Conservancy, and, we're looking forward to, supporting this organization and this cause too.
Oh, awesome.
We talked about, all right, in that little speech, I, alluded to that you have a background in the sciences.
Hmm.
You just share with our community what's your day job, apart from Gothfarm, and how does what your other work does it overlap or inspire what you do at Gothfarm, or vice versa? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, Gothfarm is sort of my side gig for my day job. I'm a science writer and science communicator at the University of Texas at Austin in their geosciences department. So, kind of working on press releases, and we put out an annual magazine once a year. So, writing feature articles for that. So, I'm sort of immersed sort of in science, just from all different sorts. So, geosciences is everything from paleontology to climate change to energy to sort of just the foundational mechanics of how the tectonic plates move across the planet. So depending on who's publishing when, it can be a very different stuff I'm writing about from day to day. And that's something I really appreciate, just because I really love learning and kind of breaking things down and seeing how you can kind of transform a scientific paper into sort of a news story that might get people interested in a topic that they may have not otherwise been interested in. So I actually kind of think there's a lot of parallels there just with yarn making, is going from a kind of a raw material, like a sheep fleece, to sort of this yarn that other people can use and be creative with in their own way. So it's kind of going from, you can write a story, spin a yarn. It's all about kind of transforming stuff into different things that other people can kind of take with and run with and do different things with. And then in general, I guess more specifically too, I think a lot of my my yarns just sort of take on a geology sorts of names. So like carbonado is a type of like really hard, named after a hard dark diamond. Ultisol is a type of like highly eroded soil. And then I have peat, sort of like a peat soil in a bog, and slate. So there's definitely some inspiration of just being around all of the rock people and their interesting names for all of their their minerals and rocks and things. And part of that just is, these often those rocks kind of have these beautiful different colors, these highly textured sort of looks and feels to them. So just looking at those minerals and think, hey, that looks a lot like my yarn sometimes. So it really is like kind of a deep well of inspiration there. So yeah, I think definitely the interest in kind of transforming things, whether it's scientific research to a press release, is definitely kind of feeds in my interest in taking something from a raw fleece to a finished yarn that people can go with. I enjoy that process of constructing stuff and transforming it into something new.
It really is alchemy. It's
Yeah, that's a
magical.
perfect
It's
word
really
for
magical, and you see that in geology for sure. Some things turning into other precious treasures. So that's really cool. We have a special spot in our heart for scientists in the fiber industry.
it.
I have a whole bunch of more questions, but I want to be very mindful of time. So I'm going to cut a couple of out and just ask
Okay.
you two more. Um, is there a kind of fiber from a heritage breed or unusual animal that you haven't yet worked with but would like to in the future?
Yes.
Mhm.
So when I read that question, or when I heard that, the breed that immediately sprung to mind was the Gulf Coast native sheep.
Mhm.
And it's a sheep that is specifically adapted to Gulf Coast regions, like along the Texas coast and along the
Mhm.
Florida coast. And I know a couple people who raise them, and I think just because they've always been kind of around and nearby, and they're like sort of a white sheep breed and look kind of like a lot of other kind of sheep, I've just sort of been like, oh, I'll get around to it. But that's the breed that sprung into my mind. Is just like, I really need to actually go and dig into that Gulf Coast native sheep. So they're supposed to be super adaptive to this region, kind of resistant to parasites, okay with the hot, muggy weather, and I hear that their wool can be really nice. And I've encountered it at festivals, but haven't really spent a lot of time, working with it, spinning with it. So definitely want to do that, just to kind of, give some love to the Gulf Coast sheep of Texas and Florida.
Yeah, the slightly less sexy than the Jacob or
Yeah,
the mohair
exactly.
goat or whatever. I think that
That's total. Yeah, that's totally it. Where it's just like, you're like, okay, that's a sheep, but the wool, that just because it doesn't have, like an amazing headpiece or something, doesn't mean the wool can't look amazing. So definitely need to give the Gulf Coast native some love.
we
And
love
it's
an
also on
adorable
the shape.
sheep, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think we'll look forward to that in future years for sure.
yeah, and it's on
Um,
the Shave 'em to Save 'em list, so it's another reason to do it.
all right, we'll hold you to that and look forward to it. So many of our customers are interested in using their craft to make the world a better place. What are your suggestions for how makers can support businesses like yours?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think just spreading, if you like it, if you see something, if you have a good experience with it, just telling other people about it, and just having that personal connection with your friends or your family, or if you're, there's a Fiber Fest nearby, dropping by to say hi, even like sending an email with kind words of encouragement, or sharing what project you made is always really, really great it's great to hear from people like that, and kind of shows that people actually are interested in sort of what small businesses, small producers are doing. And I think another important thing too is just to be part of this broader fiber community wherever you can, and share what you're doing, share what your interests are, because I think that encourages more people to kind of start their own businesses, or start exploring their creativity or learning new skills, and just creates this vibrant community that people can be a part of. And when they have new things to share, like, what you're doing here talking with me, and that string theory was wanting to reach out and showcase indie dyers and small makers, is just amazing. So anything that could be done to build community helps small yarn businesses, I think, because without that community, we don't have anything to be a part of. So whether it's a small way or a large way, just finding a way to share your fiber passion, share your passion for what you're making with other people, and give them encouragement and making them feel welcome is really important.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Monica. This has been really empowering and exciting to hear more of your background. We are expecting to get many skeins of your yarn soon, and we just can't wait to share it with the folks and in the Chicagoland area, but also nationwide. And yeah, with that, if there's any final thoughts that you have.
Just thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you and to have this trunk show. I'm looking so forward to it. So thank you for everything. And it was great chatting with you. And yeah, just thank you so much.